poetic event occurring as a space for grief, rage, love, and hope-making in this really complicated and oftentimes bitter world. We are greeting you on behalf of the Free Palestine Initiative and the publishing house Iris Illyrice. And my name is Emina, and I will be co-moderating with my comrade Aneta the conversation with an amazing writer, a Palestinian female writer, Susan Abulhawa. Good evening, Susan.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. And thanks to you, to your organization, and to my wonderful publisher for putting this together. I think this is my first time that I get to speak to a Croatian audience.
We hope to host you here, and we hope to maybe be a part of the Palestine Rights Festival at some point.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So, Susan Abulhawa is a Palestinian writer, activist, and scientist who has joined us tonight. Obviously, we are very lucky to have her with us. She is widely recognized as the most read Palestinian author, with her debut novel, Mornings in Jeninu, translated into 32 languages and selling over 1 million copies. Her subsequent works, The Blue Between Sky and Water, translated into 19 languages, and Against the Loveless World, received critical acclaim. And beyond her literary contributions, Abulhawa is an advocate for human and animal rights and the founder of the Playgrounds for Palestine, an organization dedicated to creating safe play spaces for Palestinian children.
Thank you, Emina. Thank you, Susan. We are very lucky to have Booksi, the place we are here now, and the place we are having Gaza Undated from the beginning, so thank you so much. Of course, we are very honored. Tonight with us is Linda Al Rajabi. She is Turkish and English literature and language professor, and she spent her childhood in Palestine. So this is really important for us that you could come, so thank you very much. And of course, there would be no, without Iris Illyrice, we wouldn't have beautifully translated 2 of your books, Susan, Mornings in Jeninu, and Against the Loveless World. So, big appreciation to Ivana and of course to Anya and Vlatka and Iris Illyrice. And the first question for you, Ivana, it's very interesting. Considering that we don't have that much of Palestine literature and writers. What motivated you to choose these books, and what is your publishing policy towards this? And thank you again.
Thank you for organizing this event with us. I have to say it's been almost 2 years that I'm really wanting to do something. What can I do except from publishing the books, because I had a feeling that it was not said enough in our public, and I just had this urge to do something. So this is very personal for me and very important for me, so thank you. Other thing why I chose these books, well, I'm always very sensitive about human rights, about the stories from countries that are not well represented in the world. So this book was, the first Mornings in Jeninu, was first introduced to me by Alice Maric, that's sitting here in the public. We had a beautiful collaboration with Čite knjigu book blog and book edition. So this is the second book that we chose together, and I really was into the subject. The first book was about a North Korean girl, and it really opened my eyes and my heart. I learned so much. It was really, like I said, for my personal growth, it was very important. So the second book, Mornings in Jeninu, did the same for me. So it's very important for me, and it was just so normal for me to pick other book too, you know. So I learned a lot. I really liked the author's style of writing, and I will have to thank Martina Baričević, who is the translator of both books, and I was the editor of the first book, and Tena Karačić is the editor of the other book. He couldn't come today because she's pregnant and she's about to deliver in a day or two, so she said she will watch this live. I hope we had a kind of impact on the Croatian society. I think in 2019 we had a little quiz with our readers on social media. What is the best book you read published by Iris Illyrice? And they chose this book, Monik's in Jeninu. So it was in 2019, and then in 2022 when we published Against the Loveless World, that is translated in Croatian, Srest, ćemo, sestra moja. All the book bloggers that we work with a lot of book bloggers. We love this scene, and they like our books, accept our choices, and all of them enlisted the book Against the Loveless World into the top 5 of the year or top 10. So I'm great because they help us to spread the word. And many people send us messages, this is a lovely book, I love this, you opened my eyes, thank you for this. I just feel we didn't do enough, but I'm still trying.
Thanks, Ivana and Iris Illyrice again for publishing these books, these beautiful translations. To my knowledge, Susan, you are not only a Palestinian writer that is translating Croatia, but you joined a very few. Mahmoud Darwish is one of them, and I think maybe the poet that is most translated besides Mahmoud Darwish is Asma Zazia, who has her roots as well here in the Balkans. I would have to explore more to know more about the Palestinian presence in literature in Croatia, but it felt important to mention these names. Susan, I was listening to your conversation with Dawid podcast recently, and you talked about your books being, in a way, very impactful when it comes to young Palestinians and young Arabs living in the US. You were mentioning the letters from 2 families living in California, how the books really changed their relationship with older generations in their family, how they felt more connected. And I was just going to say that I'm hoping this is the truth too for European audiences and for Palestinian diaspora in Croatia. You would probably be happy to know that we have Palestinians tonight with us in the room, and that we have some younger generation Palestinians as well with us who are really enjoying reading your work. But let's go into a conversation with you. The Mornings in Jeninu and Against the Loveless World have really, I think, made me think about how you write about geopolitics of life. And it was a really deep and embodied narration of how power, displacement, and violence inscribe themselves onto human and more than human existence. As I read your books, I found myself really having strong emotional and visceral reactions when you spoke about rapes and when you wrote about displacements and massacres, and the criminalization of Palestinians, the forced exiles, the uprooting, and all different interconnected things that happened in Palestine and to Palestinian people over the past almost 80 years. So these moments are really deeply effective, not just in their horror, but also in the ways they shape memory and identity and resistance. And so, could you tell us a bit, how do you navigate the weight of such storytelling? And does writing serve as a form of testimony, of resistance for you? Is it resistance itself? Yeah, what is the literature here? What kind of a site?
So I mean, I suppose some people see my writing as a form of resistance, and I guess it is, but I don't approach it that way. I approach it as storytelling. I approach it as art. Literature and other art forms are literally the face of every society. And it texturizes, it colors, every society in the world. But when you are an indigenous people who are quite literally being erased from the map, every act of, every cultural production, every artistic expression becomes a political act, I suppose, in a way. It becomes an act of resistance because it is an affirmation of your presence in the world. It's a homage to our ancestors who nurtured that soil. And it's also, and this is more important, it's a kind of a landscape where all Palestinians get to be with each other. A lot of people, even though I unfortunately have to write in English because that's a condition of exile. I speak and read and write Arabic, but not in a sophisticated enough manner to create art and literature. So, by virtue of the language I write in, my first readership are Westerners, or English speakers in general. So I'm often misunderstood as kind of writing to tell the Palestinian story to the rest of the world and so forth. And while I appreciate readership all over the world, and because literature is a place where humans of all walks of life get to meet each other and get to discover each other's humanity. I write primarily, my first loyalty is to the characters themselves. And because of that, that means that my primary target audience are Palestinians themselves. I write for future generations. I write for my grandparents. I write for the land itself. I write to stake our place in the world, in a world that rejects us outright, or sees us as vermin, or doesn't believe we exist. And even though I write in English, I very much, when I'm writing, because in my mind I'm enmeshed in a Palestinian milieu and in an Arab milieu, I think in Arabic. So I think even the prose, the way I write, is kind of, it's sort of, it's charged with Arabic in some ways. And I've often been accused, sometimes by critics and detractors, of writing in a way that's like too verbose or too flowery. But if you know anything about Arabic, like that's how Arabs write, literature in that kind of fashion. So even though I write in English, it's sort of, I try to maintain that sort of poetic charge of Arabic. And I'm also approaching writing from a very, from the things I learned in my Palestinian family. All the idiosyncrasies, the ways we talk, the foods we make, the way we make them, this world of women where the things you do with your grandmother and your mother and your aunties, and I write with an eye towards, and an ear and a heart towards the land itself, towards its animals, its flora, its trees, the sounds, the water, all of these things that are part of our heritage and our lives. especially those of us who come from peasant families, the fallahin. Yeah, so I mean, I can keep going, so you have to stop me every once in a while. But
no, it's okay. You can carry on. You said, if I understood you correctly, that although it's an act of art, writing itself, but the fact that you're doing it is an act of rebellion and resiliency. And we were interested in your opinion about the role of writers as such, especially in the context of your totally unapologetic and very brave relationship toward Israeli apartheid and settler violence. And what would be the role of writers, your colleagues from USA or wherever, and what are the challenges that Palestinian writers are meeting? Probably some expectations about the topic you're choosing, your relationship towards Israel, towards Palestine. It's always political, right?
so I heard a few questions in there, and I'm going to start with the kind of the essence of a writer, regardless. And I think that, in my opinion, every true artist, every true writer is a rebel. And I think you diminish in writer, and I see this all the time. I think when you cannot oppose something as profoundly grotesque as genocide, it diminishes, in my view, it diminishes not only your work, but your humanity as well. It is no accident that throughout history, some of the greatest revolutionaries were writers and singers and artists, or at least readers, deep readers.
Definitely readers.
Yeah, exactly. Almost always readers.
Always readers, right.
For sure. And so, but I think being a writer or being an artist does not always mean that you will necessarily speak truth to power. I know a lot of writers who are careerists, and in my eyes, it's hard for me to read another author, especially lately, who's silent on what's happening, and see the beauty in their words anymore. And these things are all connected, and I think, at least with me, and I don't think that all writers do this, but maybe they do. There's always a piece of me, or my heart is in every book. Like the characters in the story, it's separate from me, of course, and the characters are not me. But I do find, and my friends have told me this as well, I find pieces of my own humanity in there and of my own story sometimes. So it does, I suppose, necessarily become an act of rebellion to insist on writing in a way that is authentic, even though it is something that does not endear me to power. It does not endear me to having a lot of money. It puts me on the margins in the literary fields, and so I think the fact that this my books have sort of broke into mainstream in a lot of ways has been because of, number one, and this is most important, the readers themselves who have an appetite for it, and secondly, brave publishers like Iris Illyrice who are willing to publish people like me. I don't know what, I'm not really in touch with the political leanings in the Balkans regarding Palestine, and I don't know if it's difficult as it is here in the US, but I know that it's very difficult throughout Europe. I know that there have been a lot of campaigns to try and get my publishers to drop my books. But it's making them money, so I guess money talks louder. I don't know. Yeah, so it takes, it does take a measure of, I would say, not just courage, but also natural rage against the way that this very small group of people in the world, this very wealthy group of people, oligarchs across countries, are steering our planet off a cliff. Yeah.
These are tough and dark times. Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote in his last book too about the darkness being really layered. And you know, the Balkans very much shares the political kind of falling off the cliff type of a politics. The pro-Palestinian movement here is existent and it's somewhat strong, but it could be even stronger. There is a lot of silencing and censorship, which you are also facing through your work, Susan. And I think, you know, I was listening a little bit about what happened to the festival Palestine Rights and about the congressional hearing. I'm not sure is this still going on, but if you would speak a little bit to that type of censorship and silencing, we would very much appreciate it. And if you want, you can actually say a few words now.
Yeah. So Palestine Rights Literature Festival in the end of September 2023. It was the first in-person festival. We had planned one at NYU, New York University, in 2020, but then the pandemic hit and we ended up doing it virtually. But it was magnificent virtually, even because we did it on this sort of 3D platform with avatars that, you know, was really engaging, especially during the pandemic when people were cooped up in their homes. So it was hugely anticipated when we decided to do it in person, and truly the results like exceeded my expectations. It was brilliant. People were so inspired. People were crying, telling me that, you know, they've never been to a Palestinian event like this, it's like, etc. And it was this, and I think the magic of this event was that it was multilingual. We brought Palestinians from all over the world. It was at least bilingual. We had bilingual translation. It was multi-generational. It was multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-religious. We connected the dots. First of all, we brought all aspects of Palestinian art together in one place: literature, tadris, cooking, dance, filmmaking, scholarly productions, mapping, and virtual reality, all manner of creative expressions in one place. And we also brought writers of note from various communities of struggle, both within the United States and outside of it, and Indigenous American contributors. We had Aboriginal artists from Australia. There were Black American writers, Asian American writers, Hispanic American writers, and also other people from abroad. So it was so artistically, poetically, and Palestinianly charged. We had receipts. We had this beautiful photo exhibit from ancient photos in Palestine and so forth since the beginning of photography. And of course, because it was so amazing, the Zionists freaked out. And they freaked out primarily because, you know, they promulgate this fantasy that they are indigenous to the land, etc. That these people from Europe, from Russia, and so forth, from Brooklyn are, you know, actually are indigenous to my homeland. And yet here we are, we show up with receipts. We show up with actual belonging, with a heritage that sprang from that land. And they tried to shut us down, but that didn't work. They ended up, they pursued it and ended up forcing the president of the university, I mean, this is an Ivy League university, they forced the president to resign. And the festival is now at the center of a congressional investigation on anti-Semitism. Even though really we were the ones who faced anti-Semitism as Semites, we faced Semitism. They had trucked with these horrible sort of digital billboards with our faces on it and these like horns and this really childish, crazy stuff. And they were circulating the campus. They were calling us terrorists. They were calling us jihadis, Nazis. And so, you know, it was just, you had all these incredible, beautiful, scholarly minds and creative minds, and their pictures are plastered on the side of this digital billboard like they were demons. So the harassment was faced by us, not the other way around. But the wonderful thing is that they didn't shut us down. It was incredible. It still reverberates. And we're going to do it again.
Well, we have no doubt about it. Let's get a little back to your books. I have a question here that I have to read. It's safer like that. Another contrast that we spot between the two books is the way they engage with the resistance. Mornings in Jeninu present moments of coexistence, like the deep friendship between Palestinian and Jewish boy before Nakba, or Amal's later encounter with that same Jewish friend on his deathbed. Meanwhile, Against the Loveless World leans into resistance, portraying acts of defiance in deeply imaginative and powerful ways. Very unexpected, for example, for me. I'm very grateful for that. So from your perspective, is there still a space on both sides for the possibility of coexistence after all these years of, let's say, devastation, but we can use some other terms? And do you see a role of literature in shaping this question of coexistence?
I am no longer focused on coexistence. I am focused on liberation, I have to say. Palestine, I think, you know, the impulse against coexistence does not come from our side. I mean, we are a people with an ancient tradition of pluralistic societies. The impulse against coexistence actually comes from Zionists who feel like they need to live in an exclusively Jewish state and where the law, where everything privileges Jews at the expense of non-Jews. So I don't really, it's up to them really to talk about coexistence, not us. We're not the ones who destroyed a coexistent society that was pluralistic. They did. And for a long time, Palestinians still continue to strive for that and think about that, myself included. Before I really understood the details of the Oslo Accords, I was happy when it happened. But then, of course, it became very clear shortly after that it wasn't really a roadmap for coexistence. It was rather a roadmap for apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and now we see ultimately genocide. So I don't really care what happens to Israelis anymore. I want my people to be free. That's my focus. Whether they choose to leave, whether they choose to stay, we are not the barbarians that they are. We have millennia of understanding how to live with people. Palestine had always been multicultural. Even Jerusalem was divided under, there was the Armenian Christian quarter, there was the Muslim quarter, there was the Jewish quarter, there was, we had the Moroccan Hayy al-Maghariba in Jerusalem, where, pilgrims from Morocco came and settled. There were all manner of different sort of ethnic backgrounds who came over thousands of years and settled in Palestine. And many of them kept their original customs, but they all integrated into Palestinian society and became one society that was beautifully pluralistic. That's my heritage. That's Palestinian heritage. We know how to do that. But these people who came primarily from Europe, they came to Palestine with this very Eurocentric sense of supremacy, and that looked upon people of the East, with contempt and with supremacy. And I want no trace of that left in our land anymore. So either they will have to change and learn how to live with others, or they have to leave. That's my view. And I believe that day will come. I have no doubt that it will come. Things look really hard right now, and they seem very terrible, and they are very bleak. Indeed, they are. And we are plagued with darkness and death and destruction at their hands. But Israel is unsustainable. The kind of depravity that the world is finally seeing has no place in the future, and it should have no place in the future.
This is such an important perspective, epistemically and politically, and a literal perspective too. And in one of your interviews, you talked a lot about the colonial mindset of Israeli settler colonial system and structure and its people, and you also compared it with other settler colonial establishments like the one in the US. I really appreciated how you talked about the mindset in a way that you've spoken about the jealousy over the land, over the culture, over the food, over the taste and smells, over the olive trees and the roots in the land too. And I want to include Linda in our conversation here too, because when we spoke about your books, Linda was exactly talking about these olive trees and the lands and the smell and the culture and the memories she took from Palestine as she spent her childhood days there. And so this relationship with the land is not possessive. It is not a matter of belonging in ways of I owe this land, right? It's more of a bond that shapes everything you are, we are, and the indigenous ways of thinking about the land are very much about life sovereignty rather than ownership sovereignty too. And so, Linda, I would like to ask you, how do you maintain your connection with that land in the times of this, dispossession and land overtake and theft and the genocide?
This connection to the land is something that you can see and feel in almost every Palestinian household. Every piece of soil, no matter how small, is sacred. Every garden, every pot, every tree is holy. This is something that was very strange to me when I was a child. I didn't understand why everyone was showing the olive tree, or why we had to smell the sage and the mint. But I came to realize that this intrinsic and symbiotic connection to the land is not only visible and not only physical, it's also social and cultural and spiritual. And I think that it's also kind of a transgenerational legacy, because this land does not belong to us, we belong to the land. We are not the owners. we are its guardians and healers and caregivers. And I think that this belonging to the land is a very important aspect of Palestinian identity. And these almost a century-long attempts by the colonizer to take over the land, to erase the indigenous people and all their traces, I think it has made this belonging and this bond even stronger. And the way we resist the colonizer is by cultivating the land and cultivating the trees. You know that the Israeli government calls the trees anchors in the land, and therefore they must be removed whenever possible, because olive trees are also a symbol of Palestinian rootedness in their land. And since 1967, Israel has uprooted over 1 million olive trees. And how does this connection persist in the face of the ongoing dispossession and destruction? Well, I think that not only it persists, I think it grows stronger every day. And as much as the crimes of the Israeli occupation multiply and evolve into unimaginable horrors, I think that so does our love and our bond with the land evolve and solidify. They uproot, we plant. For example, since October 7th, 2023, in just 53 days, the occupation caused agricultural losses in Tulkarem amounting to over $6.5 million. They prevented people from harvesting olives, they uprooted trees and destroyed agricultural land. And how did the community respond? Well, by planting over 30,000 trees in 2023, because this is how we resist, by cultivating every inch of the land.
I was in a conversation yesterday with a couple of Palestinians and Arabs, and the question was, how do we maintain pro-Palestinian movement? How do we keep making it strong? And how do we support Palestinian peoples from now on? Because, you know, we have been, our protest strategies or our strategies of support were oftentimes protests and being vocal, being very loud in the streets, in our institutions, through the books we translate or write. And we paid charity money to charity organizations. And people do ask now, what more can we do? So maybe this is the question for the two of you. Could you tell us what the solidarity movements could be doing to support Palestinian people and recovery of Palestinian land?
Well, I think it depends. I know that a lot of people are scared. They are scared to speak up. I know that a lot of people in Croatia, a lot of Palestinian people are afraid of losing jobs, of losing privileges, and they'd rather not expose themselves because they are afraid. But I think that the line has been crossed, and I think that with the genocide, I think that, like Susan said, liberation is the focus now. So, Susan, what do you suggest?
No, I think that's I think you touched on the most important part. The greatest weapon that colonizers have is our fear. I read quite a bit of Native American history, not nearly enough though. And I was recently reading a biography of a Lakota warrior that I have always deeply admired. His name's Crazy Horse. And there's a moment when there's a kind of rebellion among the Lakota, and this was at the beginning of white colonial migration westward, and so they were still very few in number, and they were moving because of the gold rush. They realized there was gold in the Black Hills, which was sacred land to the Lakota. And even though the white minority, the whites were a minority, like they were just very few in number at the time, they managed to still hold on and expand. And one of the things, and so there's this moment where there was a rebellion among some young braves, and the white commander wrote back to Washington that the natives are not as scared of us as they were. They're losing their fear. I think that was the cable, the message that was about. And I think if indeed the Lakota had truly lost, and all Native Americans had lost their fear, this country would look very different. And I think that's really the most important thing we have to do, is to find a way to lose the fear. And I think for me at least, it feels like it would be easier when you see the price that people are paying. The sight of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of shredded bodies, of shredded babies, of burned babies, day after day after day, of this apocalyptic destruction. When you see that and you understand that those were people, those were real lives, those were real hopes and futures and dreams and potentials just extinguished, and then you understand that there are still people there and they're holding on to their land and they're suffering and they're thirsty and they are just barely clinging to life. I would hope that the loss of a job, the loss of a client, a little bit of inconvenience and maybe insecurity would pale in comparison. So I think, and I know it's hard for individuals, especially when you have a family and people counting on you and so forth. So I think the trick is to find power in the aggregate and in the collective. That's the only way that liberation movements can succeed, is when there is a groundswell. For me, I've always said, and I think a lot of us say, that if we really wanted to be massively successful authors and rich authors and so forth, all we would have to do is write about some Orientalist something or other, and how the West is saving Muslim women from terrible Muslim men and so forth. I don't want to give examples, but there are books out there that made millions, and sold millions rather. And they weren't necessarily bad books, but that's the theme. But when you insist on defiance in every part of your life, and you subordinate your privileges, and you subordinate this fake sort of dream that they thrust upon us, this idea of this material, this capitalistic junk that they make the world believe, that they make people believe is the essence of happiness, it's the essence of value, that your money is your value, that your beauty is your value, or all of this is connected. It's all connected. Shedding these ideas and shedding these things is part of shedding your fears as well. So it is both external and internal work that I think people in solidarity, and Palestinians themselves, have to do. When I was in Gaza twice since October 7th, And when you were talking, Linda, about how they tell you to smell everything, there was a woman that I've become quite good friends with. Her name is Emina. She was from a village in Gaza called Khuzaa. It's completely decimated. But after the Israelis withdrew, she and her family went back, and they tried to salvage what they could, but they couldn't stay there. And anyway, she came back to Rafah, and she had this bag of meramiya, which is like sage, right? Meramiya is sage, right? Yeah. And she said, "Look, smell it. It's from Khuzaa." She put it in my face. Of course, this is what our land smells like. So this is like deep attachment to the land and everything that springs from it. And the other thing was that she brought it as a gift to me. And this was a theme throughout my stay in Gaza. People who have nothing left could not let me leave without a gift. Like, I want to cry thinking about it, but it's this incredible generosity of spirit. And when you have that perspective, and when you know those people, and when you really truly reorient yourself back towards the land, back towards our ancestors, towards our history, and this glorious heritage that is ours, all of these other things that we worry about that make us afraid, they really do fade. They really, you start to see how unimportant they are. And I don't know how people get to that point. I think it's a very personal process, but I think it's necessary. It's a necessary step to begin shedding the fear that holds us all back.
Thank you, Linda and Susan. You already even spoke about your publishing dedication to the underrepresented literature and indigeneity authors from indigenous people. And Susan was speaking about losing the fear, or realizing the fear that is governing us. You are governing your publishing house, and it's of course a lot of challenges, at least in Balkans, but probably everywhere. And we were curious about, did you encounter any publishing or logistical or any other challenges when you choose Susan's books, and in the context of the literature scene as well, but in a broader way?
In the creative industry. I have to say I have a privileged position not to face any bad feedback from my business decisions and my choices. I don't know why. I'm like self-invented professional. I was never working in institutions that I had to. When I was never feeling well, when I had to suppress my opinions, or when I had this feeling something was not right, I just didn't like that, I know something is not just, and just to be, quiet or something. So my life just led me to this position, when I'm free to choose, and I can live from it. This is a privileged position. I haven't faced any problems. I normally work with a lot of cultural institutions that co-finance projects in Croatia, even the Ministry of Culture, the City of Zagreb, European Union, some EU projects that we had beautiful EU projects. So I'm really, really grateful for that. But I'm really, really ashamed and disappointed in my colleagues who are called intellectuals. I think intellectuals have the responsibility to talk about against bad practice, not only in Croatia but in the world. I noticed that many intellectuals, when they are so loud, when there's some, I don't know, misogyny, any kinds of problems in Croatian society, all kinds of problems.
But
They're
separated.
always loud, and sometimes it's even exaggerated. And now you see something that is happening in front of your eyes that's the worst thing that could happen to a human, to humanity, and they didn't say a word. So I noticed some people here in the public who are part of our community of writers and, I don't know, creative industry. I'm really glad they came. I know every person in my business who really spoke about it. Because I really numbered them, you know. They didn't say a word, they didn't say, well, how come? It is our obligations because we can form a public opinion. When there's a problem in society, intellectuals write letters, you know, they sign, they fight, they rebel. That is our obligation. So I'm blessed because, at least for now, I can do it, and I haven't faced any repercussions.
Are the books in libraries?
Yes, of course, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Maybe because of the ignorance.
Oh, they
People
don't know.
know.
They don't know. Yes.
I guess many of them don't know, they don't care.
Sometimes it's a good thing.
They have enough problems, you know, buying your daughter a good skirt, make her a beautiful birthday party, you know, and some things like that. They are very busy.
Okay. Thank you, Ivana. Okay, let's get back here.
We are losing spontaneity.
Susan, I think what Ivana was saying is really important if we want to talk about, I want to tie this into what I was asking you before, how does the future of the pro-Palestinian movements and solidarity with Palestinian peoples and land look like? And so, yeah, the public responsibility and accountability for sure. And thanks, Ivana, for mentioning that, because we've seen the big void, the big lack of it in Croatia. A lot of silence and silencing in subtle ways, too, that we cannot always articulate with words. But there are two other things that I really found important in your texts. Nat was saying at some point when she was within the cube, she was saying, you know, I found ways how to resist, not only by writing with my menstrual blood on the walls, but I've learned the other ways how to colonize the spaces of the colonizers. And, you know, I think between the lines, Nat was saying, I took the power to create my own narrative. And so I would like to ask you if you could talk about that, you know, creating the narrative, taking back the narratives, reappropriating the narratives as a fight back. And then also in addition to that, it was such a beautiful, very profound, meticulous articulation of the connections of the Black Palestinian solidarity, for instance. Noura Eraka talks about it a lot. And James Baldwin, too, was an inspiration for parts of the Palestinian resistance, and Nat was kind of articulating that connection with Baldwin and Hassan Kanafani. And so that connection was articulation of love. And in that part of the book, you say, we couldn't have survived if we didn't love each other, and if we didn't show our love to the colonizers. So I'd like you to speak a little bit about that, the love, the responsibility and accountability of public work, and what does it mean to take back the Palestinian narrative?
So just a quick note with James Baldwin, you know, the title of Against a Loveless World is a phrase from an essay that he wrote. He's very much one of my own personal heroes. Yeah, so in the book, Nahar, who is a revolutionary in my estimation, she's kind of fearless, and she does, even locked up, she finds ways that she describes as colonizing the colonizer space. So for example, you know, the example that you gave, She also, she clogged the toilet, at one point. But they have all the power. It's these tiny things that she cannot control any aspect of her world, but she finds ways to subordinate them, to bring them to her, to make them react to her. And one of the biggest ways that she did that was in the courtroom, whose authority she did not recognize. It was a colonial courtroom, had no authority over her as an indigenous daughter of the land. And she sang. She sang through, to their great consternation, and she wouldn't shut up. And I think this incident in the book demonstrates something really important. That first of all, it demonstrates that we can be defiant in every aspect. But the more important thing that it demonstrates to me is that it illuminates all the ways in which we are actually obedient, in which we follow the rules without realizing that we are actually participating in an oppressive system. Simple act of recognizing the authority of a cruel and colonial courtroom. Because laws ultimately, whether national laws or, as we see most recently, international laws, they have been fashioned as tools of oppression and tools of conquest and tools of domination. In the United States, apartheid, look at what was the law. The law was one of racial supremacy. The law in Israel is one of racial supremacy. The laws in this country were designed and enforced for racial supremacy and to genocide indigenous Americans and steal everything they have. And so I think it's important to sort of question the way we live and how we live and all of the assumptions that undergird our lives, and start defying, because also you're going to find how oppressive they are, and finding ways to be defiant, I think, is another way to shed that fear. In terms of, I also want to say something about the intellectual cowardice that we see so prevalently here, especially in the United States, but I think throughout the West. There are whole departments at universities throughout the United States that are dedicated to revolutionary studies, to women's studies, to ethnic studies, to genocide studies. Mm-hmm. That's the kicker. The departments of genocide studies, who have said not a word about this. And so in a way, what Gaza has done to the world is to basically just pull back the mask off of laws, domestic laws, international laws, off of the hypocrisy of these intellectuals and these departments and these pontificators who are holier than thou and smarter than thou, who tell us how the world is and tell us what needs to be done and how revolution is conducted. Gaza blew it all open. And right now, Palestine is the portal to the next world. Humanity, the fate of humanity has and must pass now through Palestine. We either go the way of the wealthy oligarchs, oppressors, and colonizers, and looters, and thieves, or we go the way of indigenous attachment to the land, of being good stewards of the land, of something approaching justice and liberation and reparation and dignity, universal dignity. Whichever way we go, it will necessarily and absolutely pass through Palestine. There is no way around that, despite all of the other atrocities happening around the world, and they are profound. What's happening, what has been happening for decades in Congo is profound. In Sudan, and other parts of the world. I mean, we've seen other instances of genocide, although none quite so contained and intense and horrific as what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza. And lastly, I want to say on the point of solidarity, you know, frankly, one really important way of showing solidarity is reading Palestinians. And I don't just say that as a writer, because I'm a writer, but reading Palestinians, watching our films, visiting our art, listening to our music, you start to hear Palestinians and you see us as human beings, not as hero fighters, not as pitiful victims, but as human beings who are fallible, who are beautiful, who are wicked, who are wonderful. And the full spectrum of humanity also belongs to us, and you can only find that in art. And I think becoming consumers of Palestinian art is an expression of solidarity, even if you are not outwardly active in a political way. These are all important ways to support ultimately an indigenous liberation. I don't want to call it movement, but way of life maybe.
I just wanted to add something. When you said that Palestine is a portal to a big change in all of us. So many people on social media said the same, like, we are not going to save Palestine. Palestine is going to save us. Like, Palestine is a filter through which we are going to save the truth, the dignity, the humanity. So this is the breaking point.
Yeah.
Yes, we hope for a better future. We know it's not going to happen overnight, but we just hope that we will get out of it all as better people. And when you mentioned all the beautiful artists, I have to mention some of the beautiful musicians I met through social media too. Nemesis from Canada, it's a beautiful singer, like an indie singer. She's so imaginative, such a beautiful voice. Then Saint-Laurent, he's a mix of Arab, Serbian, from Morocco, Palestine, beautiful modern music. And we've seen some shows like Mo. It's quite a nice show, and it's very nice that they are more represented now worldwide.
Thank you, Ivana. Great examples, and some of them good-looking one as well. I had to say, sorry. So, Susan, now we will show you your public, our public, and we will ask our friends if they want to ask some questions in Croatian or English as well. So, guys, yeah. Guys, whoever wants maybe can come closer and ask a question, or on a microphone maybe. In Arab, if somebody wants to speak as well. Then
there's a pole here blocking the view.
Yeah. Thank you, Emina, for your lovely assistant.
Hi, hello, thank you for your very interesting talk. I found it interesting that you talked about the idea of colonizing the colonizer's narrative. And I was wondering if you could say a few words about what it feels to you, what does it feel like for you to be writing in English in a country which basically corroborates the predominant narrative of the Zionist movement, and whether you feel that your work being written in English at least in some way contributes to the shaping of the narrative in English-speaking countries.
Thank you for that question. To be honest, I would prefer to write in Arabic, but I unfortunately, I don't have the sophistication, command of Arabic that I do of English. Mostly because it is my native tongue, and it's an immensely poetic language actually, and I feel like if I had a better command of it, I could write really inspiring prose in it. But I also love the English language as well. It's very versatile, and it can be poetically charged as well. So that's something beyond my control. I can do what I can do, and English is the tools that I have. But I think the important thing is committing Palestinian narratives to paper for the sake of, for ourselves, really, and for the rest of the world, for anybody who wants to get to know us, for anybody who wants to hear our voices. That's, we write and we create and we produce, and we come from a glorious, fabled heritage that has been diminished and demeaned and degraded and also stolen. So when I was talking earlier about colonizing the colonizer's space, I said space, not narrative. We don't need to colonize their narrative, because they are actually stealing our story. And they are claiming our heritage as theirs. They are claiming our food as theirs. They are claiming the belonging to the lands as theirs. And this is a relatively new thing, because the original Zionists were very clear in all of their communications, in their diaries, in their conferences. They were very clear that they were going to Palestine to colonize it and to settle it. They were very clear and explicit about using violence and force to remove the native inhabitants, and that's what they called us. They called us the native inhabitants, and to take our places. So there was a real clarity in what the Zionist project was, and but that was during a time when colonization was in vogue. There was literally an agency called the Jewish Colonization Agency, by the way. But then, colonialism went out of fashion. And so now there's a new narrative of indigeneity, of belonging, which does not belong to them, and it's quite a fairy tale, actually. But we don't need to colonize that. We are the heirs to those stories. We are the heirs to that heritage, and we have proof. We have the receipts for that. But storytelling is so hugely powerful, and it's nurturing to the human soul, in my opinion. Reading it's a free place. It's a place of freedom. It's a place of beauty. It's a place of knowledge, of humanity, of experiencing the full range of emotions, and that's why I feel like literature is a really wonderful. I'm going to use that word portal again, a portal into our shared humanity. And I have heard from a lot of readers, thousands actually, that reading my novels, and also the novels of other Palestinian writers, was their introduction to Palestine in a way that contravened everything they had learned from mainstream media and from mainstream discourse. Thank you.
Thank you for Some other question, maybe? I'm sure you got something.
Please come forward and
Yes.
ask questions.
Somebody?
Susan, people you're seeing in front of the screen are poets, writers, translators, Arabic
Professors.
language professors and interpreters,
Bloggers.
librarians, bloggers. I see many that have joined
Lawyers even.
Free Palestinian movement. We have lawyers. Yeah,
Well, a few.
very courageous.
I get
all of
worried
them.
when I hear lawyers, though, I have to say.
I know. These are our guys.
Okay, good, we need them.
We have a question and we'll translate it to you in English.
Ovdje stanite. Ispred da vas vidi. Tu možete.
Draga Palestinko, dobro večer.
Aha, možeš prevoditi?
Samo.
How are you guys? This is Luca.
Hi, Luca. So Slobodan here says, good evening,
Dear Pastor.
dear Palestinian comrade.
Mene zanima jedna stvar, svi znamo šta je u Palestini, kakvo je stanje.
I'm interested in one thing. We all know what's happening in Palestine.
Ne trebam o tome govoriti ništa, tragedija je ogromna, banda svjetska i tako dalje radi svoj posao. Ali mene zanima jedna stvar.
It's needless to speak about the tragedy Palestine experienced.
Zanima me kako je tamo kod vas, kakav je vaš život, baš u Americi. Imate li kakvih problema? Je li sve u redu? Ili ipak ima nečega što utječe na vaše razmišljanje, na vašu sigurnost i tako dalje.
I'm curious to learn about you being Palestinian in the United States today. What does your life look like? What are the challenges you're encountering as a writer and as a
Can you
Palestinian?
repeat that? It's hard to hear. So the last bit, can you repeat that?
So Slobodan is curious to learn about your life in the United States, how it is to be a Palestinian and a writer today in the United States, given the politics these days.
Yeah. Okay.
Još jednu stvar, imate li koga u Palestini? Jesu li živi, jesu li zdravi, je li ko ranjen, je li ko ubijen, je li ko stradao i tako?
Slobodan would also like to know, do you have family and relatives in Palestine and how are they doing? And what is the suffering your family has endured?
Thank you.
Pa draga Palestinko, sve najbolje, zaista sve najbolje u srce.
And Slobodan wishes you all the best.
Thank you. So my life in the U.S., I'm very much, I'm kind of an introvert. I have my set of friends, and I live with my animals and have a very sort of low-key life. I work a lot, and I am attacked a lot. But again, I've long ago kind of shed my fear, and and even I'm like a lot of Palestinians. One can be prepared to lose everything, and I feel like I'm no better than Palestinians who have lost everything, including their lives. I have a lot of family still in Palestine. We are a family from Jerusalem, from the Mount of Olives. The Abulhawa family is a very large family. It's the biggest family on the Mount of Olives, and we have had nearly all of our lands taken from us. A lot of our homes. The home that my grandfather built was taken over by settlers about 10 years ago, and they have just taken more of the property around that home. I don't have family in Gaza, but I have a lot of very dear friends. I speak with Gaza every day, actually, with friends there. We have a school that we started. Back in the year 2000, I started a children's organization. It's an all-volunteer organization, and initially our aim was to build playgrounds for children, and we still do that. But since the genocide began, we have been really trying to meet the needs of children as much as possible. And one of the things that we did, of course, when I went into Gaza, I took in as much aid as I could, and we did a lot of projects ranging from medical points to food points, food kitchens outdoors, and other things, to finally settling on a school that we started in Deir al-Balah, which has now moved to the north after the ceasefire because the families in the areas moved there. So I'm very much and very intangibly connected to Palestine. I was actually deported, I guess, by Israel as an infiltrator. When I was 13, I lived in Jerusalem. And actually, the chapter in Mornings in Jeninu called The Orphanage is autobiographical for the most part. I lived in that orphanage there for 3 years until I was 13 years old, and at which time you're supposed to have papers, but I didn't have papers, and so Israel deemed me an infiltrator, and I was forced to leave. And that was when I came to the U.S. Yeah, I mean, it's hard being in the U.S., I will say that, because for obvious reasons, and I am planning my exodus, and I plan to immigrate somewhere else, and my daughter and I, her husband, are trying to sort out where that country will be, where we can get away from here.
And here is another question, Tatjana Pajić.
Thanks, Susan, for sharing this.
Ti možeš I na arapskom. Pa nam proba.
Okay. Hello, Susan. I wanted to ask you something. Do you hear me?
Yes.
About that documentary, The Only Land, which depicts in a very, very painful way the situation of the dispossession and violence on the West Bank. And I would never expect it to win Oscar in the center of the world, which is so anti-Palestinian. Did it come as a surprise to you, and do you think that something like that could maybe could change something in the, maybe at least the movie will, the film will reach the wider population? A lot of people will see it and maybe understand what is going on there. But I would like to know what's your opinion about it. Thank you.
So that's a good question, and I think that I mean, if you saw my social media, I posted some criticism, but that does not mean that I was not happy for the win. However, there is a shift in society around the world. Palestine is forcing its way through, despite all efforts, and really powerful efforts, to silence and shut us down in every way. And so occasionally what they let through is something that can sort of spin the narrative a little. So the criticism that I wrote was this. Basically, this film could have been made by Basil Arda himself. It was he's a filmmaker, he's talented, he knows what he's doing. It was his footage, it was his family, it was his land, it was his story, but we all know that nobody's going to listen to a Palestinian speaking, right? And so there had to be this co-agent of an Israeli. And when that happens, you have this sort of, this Western kind of, it speaks to this Western sort of kumbaya fantasy of, oh, if everybody can just get along, everything will be fine. It ignores the profound power dynamic, the profound violence of colonialism, even though it lets you see the violence, right? But you're kind of, when you hear the director speak and say, and who doesn't, you know, this book, I mean, this story, this film was made long before October 7th. The footage was long before October 7th. But but Gaza was centered, and the way it was centered was he never said the word genocide. He said the destruction of Gaza, and then he equated it somehow with the brutal massacre of October 7th. Right? He used the terrible adjective only for October 7th. And so it becomes this like it's you know, there's a parody and when you speak that way. There's a parody and it reframes this horrible oppression as just these two people who don't like each other, who hate each other, and yes, one has a little bit more power than the other, but if we can just work together and everybody can get along, everything will be fine. And, you know, on the one hand, maybe that's necessary to wake people up, I don't know. In the United States, there's a story called Huckleberry Finn. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
We are. We all read it.
Right. So, right. So, you know, there had to be a Huckleberry Finn in order for there to be for anybody to see Jim. You know what I mean? So maybe that's the situation here. But I can still be critical of it. At the same time that I'm glad it saw the light of day. And because Palestinians deserve the full menu of dignity. And the full menu, we don't have to fawn and be happy and just be grateful because, you know, an Israeli elevated Palestinian voice. And so that was my position on the matter. And of course, a lot of people, I mean, you know, people's response was, yes, you know, right on, you're absolutely right. And then on the other hand, there was a diametrically opposed response that, you know, you have to criticize everything. Why can't this was a good thing? Just accept it and be grateful, and etc. And I don't think it has to be either or. I really don't. And as thinkers, as intellectuals, it's our duty to bring nuance to situations, to critique a situation, and people get to make up their own minds. Frankly, I think that this story was compelling in its own right, as so many Palestinian films are, and even better than this one, but they don't make it. They don't make it to the Oscars because there isn't that Israeli co-agency that goes along with it. But of course, Israeli stories don't need us, right? They get to stand on their own right.
I could agree with a great deal of what you said. And what we saw in Germany when the film was first got the prize was that their Minister of Culture applauded and then had to apologize and say that she didn't applaud to the Palestinians, she applauded to the Israeli. This speaks many words. And well, I also have some reservations of that kind, but then I think it is very good that this film reaches so many people, because I think you can't be untouched by the tragedy you see there. So when I think about pro and cons, I see a lot of pros in it, so let it be, let it go like that, and maybe it could pave way to the exception of a fully Palestinian film one day, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and regarding the minister of culture in Germany, it was, you know, it speaks to how dehumanized you have to be to say that about Palestinians. Like how dehumanized Palestinians have to be in order for her to say that so comfortably and freely. Like I'm not. And the Palestinian is so clearly the victim in that story. He was a beautiful young man who is being essentially tortured by the state, him and his entire family. And for her to so easily and simply say, I wasn't applauding for him, I was applauding for the Israeli co-agent, really speaks to how degraded, how worthless Palestinian life is in Europe, Germany in particular.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for your questions. Thank you so much. So at the end, most of you know that we invented these gatherings, Gaza Undated, so at the very beginning of genocide, because we needed a place for a sorrow, but as well for a creation. And we primarily intuitively, now we have some knowledge, but primarily intuitively, and maybe regarding our experience of the 90s, we needed this space, and we felt that there is a kind of a discipline of sadness and imagination at the same time. So this is according to your suggestion that we should read and try to know more and to feel more from the Palestinian experience. And this is why here is a very short question. Some concrete suggestions, how can we support and help Playground for Palestine and Palestine rights. So maybe you can suggest something here at your disposal. I think the audience and we as Initiative for Free Palestine as well. So a few words, please.
Thank you. I mean, supporting Playgrounds for Palestine ultimately is really mostly donation, because unless you live in the United States, here we sell olive oil from Palestine and soap and things like that to fund some of the projects. But ultimately, we act as a fundraising and education arm that supports initiatives in Palestine that either we start or that are started by others, and we just start promoting. With Palestine Rights, we're a bit at a crossroads. I mean, Palestine Rights was established to be as the first North American literature festival that's dedicated to Palestinian productions. However, given the fact that there is so much anti-Palestinian venom directed at us, and particularly at Palestine Rights, and also because we are thinking about the need to decenter the United States and in our intellectual endeavors, we might have it in another country. So we're still looking into that, but you know, it ultimately is about fundraising. We need to fundraise in a lot of ways to make this happen, especially because what we envision for this next festival, at least the way it is in my mind, is quite spectacular. And I don't want to mention which country we're thinking just yet, because nothing is concrete, but it is in one of the solidarity countries that have been, very vocal for support.
Ireland.
Don't tell us, but tell us.
Europe.
Well, there are few. You've got Ireland, Spain, Namibia, South Africa, and a few others. Anyway, so that's the idea right now. However, because it's a hugely labor-intensive endeavor, and because we usually don't have a lot of money. Like the last one, I was literally working like 10 to 12 hours, sometimes 16 hours a day for months on end. weekends included. It's just a lot, and to do that again, I need a year free. So right now I'm trying to finish a new novel. So 2025 is dedicated to my own work, and then hopefully 2026 will be the year it happens again. I hope, fingers crossed. And if you guys have any ideas, please get in touch with me, because we always want brilliant people with their ideas, and
We are very happy to hear that you are writing your 4th novel.
He's really anxious.
Luca needs to go for a walk, and we are coming to a close here. We will ask Linda to read a passage that she finds compelling and inspiring, and we'll ask Linda to read in Croatian, so we bring some language diversity here. Thank you so much, Susan, for being with us tonight. We are greatly inspired by reading your work, and we've been really touched, deeply moved by everything you wrote. Your books are the trees in many ways. And so thank you, Booksi, thank you, Ivana, Anja, and Vlatka, and Iris Illyrice, and the Free Palestine Initiative in Croatia for making this possible. And then Linda, please take us to a close.
Okay, thank you, Susan. It's been an honor. I'm really very grateful. I chose this passage that speaks about the way Palestinians love, because I was so enraged when the genocide started. I was so enraged to see sentences like Palestinian mothers love their children the same way we love our children. I mean, so Palestinians have been dehumanized to the point that you have to remind people that Palestinians mother love their children. This is the reason why I chose this passage. It's from Mornings in Jeninu, when Fatima talks about the way we love and of our grief and anger. Okay, thank you, Susan. Amal, ja mislim da većina Amerikanaca ne voli onako kako mi volimo. To nema veze ni sa kakvom urođenom manom, niti njihovom superiornosti. Oni žive u sigurnim, plitkim dijelovima koji rijetko tjeraju ljudske osjećaje do dubina u kojima mi živimo. Shvaćam tvoju zbunjenost. Pogledaj na primjer strah. Nama je strah ono što je drugima užas, jer smo postale imune na oružje koje je stalno u nas bilo upereno. A užas koji smo mi doživjeli malo će zapadnjaka doživjeti. Izraelska nas je okupacija kao vrlo mlade izložila krajnostima vlastitih emocija, sve dok više nismo mogli osjećati nego u krajnostima. Uzroci naše tuge tako su čvrsto isprepleteni s gubicima da je smrt došla živjeti s nama, poput člana obitelji koji te usrećuje tako što te izbjegava, ali koji je svejedno član obitelji. Naša je ljutnja bijes koju zapadnjaci ne mogu razumjeti. Naša tuga može rasplakati kamenje, a ni način na koji volimo nije iznimka. To je vrsta ljubavi koju možeš poznavati samo ako si osjetio jaku glad koja ti noću tjera tijelo da pojede samo sebe. Vrsta koju poznaješ samo nakon što te život zaštiti od padajućih bombi ili metaka koji su prošli tvojim tijelom. To je ljubav koja roni čista prema beskraju. Mislim da ondje Bog živi.
Thank you, Susan.
It was amazing to hear this once again. Beautiful, beautiful written words and sentences by Susan Abulhawe. I am so curious about one thing about the Palestinian oil, like olive oil, because we from Croatia are very proud of our olive oil. Yeah. So I would ask Linda, can she compare like the Dalmatian olive oil and Palestinian? Why is the Palestinian olive oil the best? Okay,
no,
Austrian or Dalmatian, whatever. Why is the best in the world? Why do you think, Linda, please?
If
you know?
If you think.
Can you tell me, please?
Maybe I'm not objective now, but but I think that Palestinian olive oil is the best in the world because why? Because of this deep love and connection to the land, this transgenerational
And you cannot
love
get it.
that yes, and we just in Croatia we don't have this bond with the land. I think that's the reason why it just tastes so amazing.
You haven't tried my
You haven't tried our olive oil.
Okay.
Battleground.
So we know Luca needs to go for a walk, so we'll let you go. Thank you so much for being with us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Susan. Ovdje nalazi se prijevod dio Susaninih knjiga. Donacije ili dio od prodaje ovih knjiga ide inicijativi za slobodnu Palestinu, a mi možemo dalje usmjeriti na festival Palestine Rights ili Playgrounds for Palestine, jer se je bilo stvarno u duhu svega o čemu smo razgovarali ovdje večer. Hvala vam na dolasku.
Hvala.